Thank you very much. Okay.
Welcome.
What do we get up?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is on. Is yours on? How's yours?
Okay. Let's come a little closer. Is that better?
I think so. Ilse, everyone.
Can you hear us?
We're okay? The mics are okay? Okay. So we will be taking questions from the audience. I'm Leanne's butter baby. I'll be running this little Q&A for this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask you, we'll start maybe talking about your films and the experiences that you've had making your movies. I know you told me that you and Howard you traveled all around Europe when making Jess Franco's film. Do you want to talk about that?
I let Howard tell this because it was really one of the most wonderful experiences. We had recently married, and so for us who hadn't had a honeymoon, it was the opportunity to work in Europe was very exciting. And although there are many things that went on with that movie that did not please me, and to this day do not, I think they gave the character 27 different names, but Howard will tell you one of the most wonderful things about Jess Franco, who is a true linguist, could speak in multiple languages simultaneously. I mean, not like a ventriloquist, but one actor to another. And Howie, would you want to tell them the trip that Jess designed for us?
Well, before I tell you about the trip, she mentioned the fact that he spoke many languages, but what he was able to do that I've never met anybody else that could do this was speak in those languages to different people in the different languages without taking a beat. In other words, she was the only one on the set that spoke English. Oh yes, I did. And everybody else spoke 7 different languages, and Jess would shoot directions in the language that each person spoke without even no break whatsoever, which meant she had to know what the last sentence was of the person that was speaking in some foreign language before she spoke. And it was a very interesting situation. I've never come across that before, nor since. Jess is the kind of a guy that has traveled all over the world. And when Jess goes around the world, his passion is food, jazz, and naked women. Jess likes naked women a lot, better than food and jazz, as a matter of fact. We were leaving on a trip, and we didn't quite know where to go once the movie was finished. Jess told me to come by his hotel, and we sat there for 3.5 hours with a map and a pad, and he mapped out what country we should go to in order that the trip went logically across Europe, what hotel to stay in, what restaurants to eat breakfast or lunch or dinner in, and took us through the whole trip, and to ask for the chef by name. And we did that. And it was probably the most fantastic experience anyone can have. And I give you one short incident. We were stuck in traffic at one point coming into someplace in France. We got into a hotel called Le Chat, which is...
Tell them why. Well, absolutely, we adore cats. And dogs too, horses too, men especially, but cats are kind of fun. And when you go to Le Chat, they have every cat in Italy that has no place to go. It's a haven, and it would be the most incredible thing to see. I don't exaggerate to say you could get up in the morning and 100 cats would be draped on the marble floors or on the balconies or hanging from the trees. Absolutely, and clean as a whistle. The place was immaculate, but It was Le Chata, and this was his favorite of all the places that he went to, with instructions how he'll tell you what.
Well, he told us what to order, and even he told us everything to do. The kick here is the fact that we got in late at night, the place is all closed up, and somebody comes to the door, and she says, "Yes, can I help you?" She's asleep. And we said, "Yeah, we're supposed to see so-and-so, check in and see so-and-so." He said, "He's sleeping." We said, "Well, tell him that Jess Franco told us to ask for him." This is the God's honest truth. She went in, she woke him up, he came inside with a nightcap on, like you see in movies, a nightshirt down to his ankles, and he said, "So, sit." And he went and started cooking.
Baby lamb chops.
Baby lamb chops were his specialty. It was amazing. And the other thing I mentioned in this, she says everybody loves cats. When I met her, she had 7. Count them. 7 cats, and I was allergic. And the outcome of that was, once we got engaged, she gave them all away. She found a home for every one of them. And consequently, her engagement ring is a cat. It is, with a little ball. And that's the story.
And you outgrew your allergy?
Oh yeah, yeah. Now we have a cat. Now I'm not. The cat's allergic to me.
So Dyanne, you actually got your start in you were doing stage acting and you were doing comedy. So how do you go from that to this, to playing these villains?
Just lucky, I guess. I think as an actress, especially when the first job comes in, you just want the job, and you don't really say, I'm going to do Shakespeare, or I'm just going to do this or that. But I seem to, by my looks, gravitated to comedy. And anything that I did, and I worked a lot of major places doing comedy, and so I just fell into that. But as a result of working with other directors or other actors, opportunities of television came to me. And from the television shows that I was in, they all seemed to be like Star Trek or Felony Squad. They were either the very serious or the detective kind of thing, where television is not that serious sometimes, so you kind of be middle of the road. And as a result of that, I made friends who, at that point, I had no agent, because with stage work, you could just go audition, and you got the job without an agent. And television, a friend would know the director, and you could get hired after you read for something. In films, it was much more difficult, and I had a great deal of difficulty because by then I was already well into my 20s, and I was told that you're 22, we only represent girls who are like 16, 17. If you are under 20, we'd be interested. Yes, you seem to have talent, but we want to groom someone. You're already past that prime. So the joke became that all the film work I didn't have an agent on any one. When I did Point of Terror, that came from the previous one called Love Me Like I Do, where I met Peter Carpenter, where I met the other people. And then when they did their next film, they said to the director, "Why don't you look at Dyanne Thorne?" And they did, and I get the job. So all of the film work that I've done, there was not an agent on any one, which is very interesting, except for SS. Oh yes, my age. I had one for SS who I'd never worked for before. He called me the day of SS auditions, and I was dressed a little bit like I am today because I was working as a chauffeur. So I had the chauffeur hat, patent leather boots, and knickers, and a very kind of uniform, if you will. And I couldn't show up until the end of the shooting day. And so when I did, and mostly everyone had already been seen for a week. And there I was in the costume, and they said, "Stay." So, but that agent, the next day when I went to discuss this with him, there was a thing on the office. He had closed up shop and moved to Florida to be an agent there, and there was no forwarding. So I don't even think he paid his rent. So he was not really my agent, more than saying, "Go to this address."
You mentioned a little bit about your passions in cats, but I know that you also ride horses, and I know for some of your films you've shot your own guns, and you did some of your own stunts. So maybe you could talk to us about that and talk to us a little bit about your passions in life.
Well, Howard is my passion, but other than that, and intermingling with my fans like this is really, I may sound phony, but just touches my heart. I've said to Howie, I feel sorry for big stars, and I use a name like a Barbara Streisand because she refuses to let anyone look at her. If you make eye contact and you work in the hotel, you've lost your job. What a waste. Because I wouldn't trade her position and where she relates to her fans for any one of you. Because the letters that I get, the notes that I get, just the hellos that I get, I know they're heartfelt, and it makes a big difference. But about the passions of animals, I'll let Howie tell you funny stuff about tigers with the horses.
Well, there's a couple of scenes in Tigers with horses. Now, John Dunning was the producer, also the original writer of the first draft, although we never really knew about that. He had asked Dyanne and myself separately many times, can Dyanne ride? And I said yes, and Dyanne said yes. Now, while they were filming the scene in Tigers where she comes out of the burning fort, what have you, with her two henchmen, who were expert riders. I was sitting with John Dunning up above in whatever, and he's watching. John Dunning was a very quiet, very small little mustache, very reserved man. Elegant is a good word. And while sitting there, this scene is coming up, and John says to me, can she really ride? I said, John, she can ride. I promise you. Well, the scene takes place, they blow the fort, she comes out with the two guys and they can't keep up with her. And I'm laughing, and John Dunning, as elegant as he is, he goes up and yells, you son of a... He went bonkers and came right back down. I said, I told you she could ride. Well, unfortunately, they blew up the fort, they couldn't use the shot again, they couldn't do it again, and somebody screwed up because they rode, for that scene, the wrong way. They were supposed to come out this way, they came out this way. It didn't match anything.
And it was negative, they couldn't reverse.
And they couldn't reverse negatives at that time. Today they could. In fact, today, you could have ridden out. It wouldn't matter, it'd still be her face. That's what happened with John. Done.
Oh, tell me about you in the horse barn.
Oh, I had scenes with her where I was on a horse, and I got thrown every day for a week. I just looked at the horse, and I'd fall down. Now comes my big scene. Oh, wonderful. My big scene comes where I ride in on a big horse with my gun and my spear. And John said, shall we get you a stunt double? For what? I fell so many times, I know how to do it perfectly. This was my thinking, for any of you that ride horses. My thinking was, if I go really fast, if I can get myself to kick this animal, and really come in fast, and then pull the reins, if I do fall, I'll fall back. Wrong. I fell right on my ass, to tell you the God's honest truth. Boom. But they managed to edit it. They did it well, and they took care of the cuts.